All right, this evening for Tech-10, we are going to have Joe Steinmetz.
Perfect.
All right, K6 SAT. Joe is the radio communications coordinator for the Western States Endurance Run and for the Tevis Cup. And so this year, we don't have any conflicts between field day and these events. So that means that hopefully a lot of us will have an opportunity that maybe we haven't taken in the past to work with Joe. And Joe, come on over and let's find out what the opportunities are for these events this year. Thank you.
Can you all hear me without the microphone?
Use the mic.
Use the mic. All right. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. So I'm the ham radio coordinator for Western States. Randy is the ham radio coordinator for Tevis. She can't be here tonight. Apparently power is still off in Placerville area, at least some areas. So we basically support each other. So I volunteer for Tevis, she volunteers for Western States, and we try to organize an army of ham radio operators to support both events. And as was mentioned, normally there's a conflict between field day and Western States. And so every once in a while, that's not the case, and that happens to be this year. Before I get to specifics, I just wanted to show everyone, you may have seen this last year when I presented it. This is the course that goes from Squaw Valley to the high school track in Auburn. Okay, lots of canyons, lots of rugged territory, many places where there is no cell coverage, and so we rely mostly on ham radio, repeaters, simplex, digital modes, in order to provide communications across those 100 miles, of course. There's slight differences between Tevis and Western States, but generally the course is mostly the same. The canyons that I mentioned are particularly challenging for communications, as you can imagine. So I've circled them here. So these are our two main canyons. If you've ever been hiking out in the Deadwood area, or something called Swinging Bridge, it's a nice hike down to a canyon, or El Dorado Canyon or Creek from Michigan Bluff. Those are shown here. RF doesn't do so well in those canyons, and so we set up crossband repeaters in order to enable communications. And in the case of the El Dorado Creek, that one is linked to the W6EK repeater during the event. We use a portable crossband repeater up here as well in order to provide communications as sweep runners come over the crest of the Squaw Peak and head towards towards Lions Ridge. So the course has challenges, and we've had numerous medical situations that ham radio has come to the rescue. So it's very rewarding to be involved in one of those situations when that happens. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So just some statistics. Obviously, it's 100 miles. As a runner, you don't want it to be too much over 100 miles. This one's only 0.2. Tahoe Rim Trail is 2 miles over 100, which after 100 miles, 2 miles is a lot. There's 21 aid stations for Western States, and this year we hope to have radio support at every aid station. And normally we don't have just one ham radio operator. Usually there's a team, depending on the aid station. So we have well over 100 amateur radio operators participating in either event. 369 runners. We try and maintain that number because there are certain portions of the course that are regulated by the Forest Service. And if you go below, then your permit automatically goes to the lower number. So through a variety of mechanisms, we try to maintain 369 runners each year. It's a couple hundred for Tevis, although they've not had a couple hundred recently. So we have crews for runners, so there's usually 2, 3, 4 people. So you can imagine there's a lot of people You add in the aid stations, it's 1,500 volunteers on the course of those 2 days. So a lot of people. As I said, 100 ham radio operators, a team at each aid station. Sometimes we run a couple teams. Some of the shifts can be 18, 20 hours long. That's a lot of time to be out there, so sometimes we have multiple shifts. Net control is kind of the nerve center for all of the communications, all of the tracking for the runners. That's located on Pacific Avenue, so the Auburn Dam Overlook, as it used to be called. I think it's called something else now. It's a convenient location for providing communications. We use a lot of different repeaters. W6EK is one of them, both the UHF and the VHF. Other repeaters, the W6SAR repeaters, there's a few of them from that group. Also the W6YDD repeaters. There's the 1.2 gig repeater, we use that. There's the VHF repeater. We probably use about 7 or 8 during the event, and then we have a couple of backup repeaters in case of failure. We use simplex in situations where we need to coordinate between aid stations for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's sharing access to a WinLink KA node where you're so close there's RF interference, so you have to coordinate. Some of the sweep runners will use simplex for coordinations on their team. And then we use a lot of WinLink. And as Greg will tell you, WinLink is not APRS. And so we'll learn more about that here soon. So voice, we use these bands. We have crossband repeaters. Kenwood VM71As, if you're familiar with that, mobile radio. They're remotable, and they have crossband. So we can actually deploy a radio, a couple of antennas, battery in a remote location, and on the day of the race, we'll activate it remotely. And we're able to do that fairly easily. But of course, the locations are interesting places because of the location that we're trying to cover is not easily accessible. So in some cases, it's the side of a cliff with a chain holding everything up. So we also have hotspots. There is Wi-Fi. There is cell coverage in a few places. We take advantage of that. Next year, we're actually looking at deploying an Iridium modem for one particular aid station where the runners come through at such a rate. It's one of the early ones in order to capture it. They just don't have good cell coverage. They don't have good WinLink coverage. And voice coverage, and so this would be a potential solution to that. So what's new this year? We've had a lot of issues. I wouldn't say a lot. We had a few issues at Net Control last year where we had some cabling issues with microphones and the audio would cut out. We would have the audio going to the speaker cut out, caused a little bit of confusion. We had a power supply failure. Bottom line is we had some old commercial radios that have been there for probably in service for 15, 20 years. They've all been replaced with modern commercial radios programmed for ham radio frequencies. We've also added some additional bands that are linked to various repeaters in order to reduce the interference. When you have a lot of transmitters, as you are all well aware of, like on field day, in a single location, you get a lot of interference potentially, especially VHF. So we run VHF, we run UHF, we run 1.2 gig in such a way that we don't have any interference now. We also did not have coverage for the race, both Tevis and Western States, the run on the Squaw side. There was a repeater that used to be there that was broken for 3 years. Finally got repaired. It's up and operational. We used it for Tevis. We'll use it for Western States. So now we have communications from Squaw Valley all the way to Auburn on UHF, which is kind of cool. It's a little bit noisy, so we're putting in a Yagi and trying to make the signal a little bit better. And then we also added a WinLink gateway in Michigan Bluff. So some of you who are doing WinLink, and I know some of you are doing WinLink, you use some of my gateways. There's a new one in Michigan Bluff on 145.63, and it's K6SAT-12. You may be familiar with -10 and -11, which are in Loomis. This is in Michigan Bluff, so quite a bit higher, getting good signal reports from it. And so give that a try. It's on there 24/7. It's open to the public. And then last year we had some, we're kind of ready to pack away towards the end of the race, put all the communications gear away, and we had some medical issues and problems near the end of the race. No Hands Bridge and Roby Point. You figure if you get close to those, you're probably going to finish. Was not the case for a couple runners. We had a couple runners collapse, unconscious, needed medical attention, and were in the hospital for a week or so afterwards. And one of the complicating factors is we did not have communications at the last two aid stations. We figured we didn't need them. We had cell coverage, etc. Well, No Hands Bridge, called them on the cell phone, no cell coverage. And they ended up closing too early. They closed before the sweep team got there. Roby Point, no radio. We had a collapsed runner. We couldn't coordinate. So we're putting voice communications at both No Hands and Roby Point. So those are new opportunities for people that may want to volunteer and help out there. And then lastly, we've been more recently operating under the W6 SRS. That's the club name for the SOS, the Tevis Riders group. And so Western States, we've put together a club, so we have our own club call for the event, which is WS8ER, so Western States, the eights, ER for endurance run. And we did apply for that right before the government shut down. And so when they turned back on a week later, we got that. So we'll be operating under that call sign at net control, and then you'll probably see the Michigan Bluff Gateway switch over to that call sign, since that's a Western States sponsored node. The K6SAT-10-11 are my nodes, so they'll remain in my name. So just a few things. So we have sweep runners out there. We don't use horses anymore in Western States. They're used obviously in Tevis, but we use runners for sweeps. So these are the runners that follow the pack of runners, trying to help out any situations, whether they be medical or logistical or what have you. They carry radios, they're licensed. A lot of new licensed people, so sometimes you'll hear things not going so well over the radio because they're new operators, and we are doing training. So tomorrow is a training run, not only for runners, but also for radio operators. So, if you hear something not quite right, we probably hear it too, and we will correct it, so a little patience, but a lot of new operators. We probably have close to 18 licensed amateur radio operators that are runner sweepers, and I would say half of those are new this year. So aid stations, it's like field day. There's no power, so you need to be off the grid, whether that's solar or generator or batteries or a combination of that. You need to be able to operate voice. You need to have a backup, sometimes simplex, and sometimes digital. Different aid stations have different requirements. Generally, we like to do WinLink because it runs a little bit faster, and it's a little bit less prone to errors. We track runners in terms of the number and the time when they come through an aid station. And the goal is to not lose anyone. And so we reconcile numbers at each aid station. And it seems like a simple thing, but it actually is pretty complex. You do end up with holes and trying to figure out, why am I missing a runner? You're not really missing a runner, hopefully, but through communications and the tracking system, we resolve all of those so that we don't lose anyone. So it's a great opportunity for you to take your equipment and make it usable in the field. And so if you're operating in field day, most likely you have what's needed to work at an aid station. If you're running WinLink, sometimes you need a little bit of extra things. Obviously you need some sort of a TNC. We like hardware TNCs, not software. It's a matter of robustness in the field. In the afternoons, the valley heats up and propagation changes on VHF, and so things get degraded, they get congested, which is why we've added KA nodes, we've added digipeaters, we've added gateways to help overcome some of that, but we still recommend actual TNCs, so things like Cantronics and et cetera. So a few pictures. There's a few of you here that have volunteered last year. I think Bruce, you're there in the middle. So you can see what some of the operations are. There's a power supply. They're tied to a generator. There's a battery for backup. They're running WinLink there in the upper left-hand corner, so they've got a laptop. This was done at Rucky Chucky, the river crossing. So this is where there was some RF issues with WinLink, and so they had to coordinate with Simplex between aid stations. So that's what the second radio is for. Our sweep runners, the DeWalt box is a crossband repeater. So inside there is a Kenwood Mobile, a great big 80-pound battery, and then the associated electronics for it. Last Chance, a picture there. To get out of Last Chance from an RF perspective requires a little bit of height, so it's a challenging location to operate from. And then some of the easier areas, Forest Hill, you really don't need much, but if you operate at night and you think a handheld is going to work, sometimes the conditions change and a handheld doesn't work even from Forest Hill. So we recommend something like a Diamond X50 at a minimum. Some of the aid stations are a little bit more complex. So, if you work an aid station over and over again, you tend to try and improve things. So this is Dave Nishikawa, and he operates from Lion Ridge. So he provides, WinLink via VHF through a variety of means. Cell phone booster for the local people to get out. They actually transmit numbers through the cell phone system through a booster. Tied to timing mats, but sometimes that goes down, so then they switch over to WinLink. If that doesn't work, then they switch over to voice. He also runs a crossband repeater. One of those red circles is this area here. So that's all I had. I just wanted to thank everyone. The W6EK is one of the main repeaters that we use, not only for the training runs, but for the event. It's well known, good coverage, except when it rains. You guys know about that. UHF is important to us as well because we can avoid interference. So at net control we use UHF, in the field they use VHF. And then we use the crossband repeaters tied into the W6EK. We'll be doing that tomorrow as well, so you may hear a little bit of traffic related to crossband repeater usage. Some of the sweep runners will be testing it to make sure they know how it operates. So that short tail, the short no tone, that's really good because it can confuse them, right? Is it really there? It's hard to tell sometimes, but without it being there with a half duplex crossband repeater, the advantages are great in that you don't end up cutting off anyone. And the phone patch. So we used the phone patch last year. Unfortunately, we didn't know ahead of time that we were going to need long distance, and unfortunately long distance didn't work. We had a really bad medical situation at Cal 2, which is between Forest Hill and the river. And we had a runner who wasn't doing so well, who took an Advil and ended up choking, and as part of that choking process, he tore his esophagus, and he cut off one airway to his lung, and his lung collapsed. And the year before, we had radio support. We didn't have enough personnel. We didn't staff that till like 11 or midnight that night. Last year we were fully staffed, so we didn't have any problems there. But when the call came in, we made the call to fire rescue, and they were waiting at the point where they brought them out up above on Cal 2, literally in less than 10 minutes. And that's a remote location. So ham radio was to the rescue, okay? So now, we also have that one situation where runners have problems there and we're questioning their ability to move forward. That's when we have this medical conversation over the phone patch. And so I know you guys have switched to VoIP and that long distance works now, but aid stations count on that. We have medical personnel who make decisions. And so rather than, talking on the cell phone, talking on the radio, we just patch in the doctor and they talk and they make a decision. So phone patch is the only phone patch we have access to is this one. And so great feature. That's it. I have some handouts I'll put back over here maybe, if anyone's interested on how to sign up and where to sign up, whether it's for Western States or for Tevis. Yep.
Do you, on WinLink, are you using Packet on VHF? Or are you using Pactor?
Packet.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a couple operators that sometimes try out Pactor on HF for WinLink.
Yeah.
And while it works, it's not reliable enough to use just that. So VHF, and we have a number of gateways and paths that we've defined from each of the aid stations that generally will give you a good equation or a good reference of how to find a way out of wherever you're at. So we have that all documented and ready to go. But with that said, sometimes it doesn't work, and that's why we use voice as backup. Any other questions?
What are the dates?
29th and 30th. I think. Wow. 29th and 30th. I have it on the handout. So 29th and 30th, and field day is the weekend before, I think. Yeah. And then Tevis is July 20th. So I'll put this back at the table. It has all the information on it. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.